There is something that happened recently, something you did, something you finally said, or something you finally released. And even if no one around you marked the moment, even if the room was quiet and the day looked ordinary from the outside, something shifted. You felt it. Maybe it was the moment you finally stopped explaining yourself to someone who was never truly listening. Maybe it was the morning you got up anyway, even when every reason you had to keep going felt thin. Maybe it was the night you chose to believe one more time, not because the evidence was strong, but because something deeper than logic told you that giving up was not what you were built for. Whatever it was, you did it. And I need you to hear this before we go any further. Heaven did not miss it, not 1 second of it. You are a chosen one. I do not say that as a greeting or a pleasantry. I say it because there is a particular kind of person who ends up in a place like this, hearing words like these, and it is not random, and it is not accidental. Chosen ones carry something the rest of the world cannot always see, and because of that, their lives often look confusing from the outside. People who love them wonder why things take so long. People who do not understand them mistake their stillness for passivity, their silence for weakness, their patience for giving up. But you know what you have been doing. You have been holding. And holding when everything in you wants to let go is one of the most powerful things a human being can do. There are signs that mark a chosen one in this season, and I want to name them plainly so you can hear yourself in them. The first is that your sensitivity has increased in ways you cannot fully explain. Things that used to wash over you now land differently. You feel things more precisely. You notice the weight behind people's words, the absence behind their smiles, and you sometimes have to step away from crowds, not because you are antisocial, but because you are absorbing what others cannot even register. The second sign is that your dreams have become more vivid, more directional, more loaded with meaning, as if something is trying to speak to you in the language your waking mind has not yet learned to receive. The third sign is that you have been moving through a season where the relationships and environments that once felt stable have quietly been rearranged. Things have shifted without dramatic announcements. People have moved away or grown distant, and new space has opened up where something used to stand. The fourth sign is that there has been a recurring sense of being on the edge of something, a feeling that you are standing just before a threshold you cannot quite name, but cannot stop moving toward. And the fifth sign, the one that perhaps brought you here today, is that you recently did something that cost you something, and part of you knows, at a level below language, that it mattered. Beloved, you are not imagining it. You are not inflating the significance of ordinary moments to cope with a hard season. What you have been living through has been real, and what you have been doing inside it has been noticed by something far greater than public opinion or social recognition. Heaven has not been watching you fall behind. Heaven has been watching you become. And there is a difference between those two things that is worth every year you have spent wondering. I want you to know that the pause you are in right now is not punishment. It is not evidence of divine neglect or cosmic indifference. The chosen ones who have gone before you, the ones whose names appear in ancient texts and whose stories have outlasted empires, they all passed through a version of this exact season. The season where what they carried was invisible to the people closest to them. The season where the only confirmation they had was internal. A quiet, persistent knowing that would not be reasoned away. You are in that company. And the fact that you are still here, still moving, still listening, is proof of something that neither you nor I need to manufacture an argument for. You already know it is true. The waiting is not over because you finally arrived at the right moment. The waiting is over because you finally did the thing, took the step, released the weight, or spoke the truth that activated what has been dormant. You have not been waiting for this moment. This moment has been waiting for you. Before I take you deeper into what this season truly means and what is now beginning to move on your behalf, I want to pause for just a moment and share something with you. What you have been experiencing, the heightened sensitivity, the vivid dreams, the sense of being on the edge of something significant, is not only spiritual in nature. There is a science to it, and I think it will matter to you to understand it. Researchers who study human brainwave activity have found that chosen ones, people with unusually high spiritual sensitivity and creative intelligence, actually carry a stronger baseline of gamma brainwave activity than the general population. Gamma is the frequency associated with heightened awareness, rapid connection between ideas, and what some researchers describe as breakthrough cognition. But here is what they also found. Seasons of waiting, of hardship, of being unseen and unrecognized actually suppress that frequency over time. Your gamma, the very signature of your calling, gets quieted by the weight of the years. Dr. James Rivers, a neuroscientist with over 30 years of research affiliated with MIT, discovered a way to restore and amplify that frequency using a precisely calibrated 7-minute audio experience he developed called the Genius Wave. Not through effort, not through skill, not through anything you have to learn or practice. 7 minutes. That is all. If you feel something stir in you when I describe it, the link is already waiting for you in the pinned comment below. We will come back to this in much greater detail very soon. But I did not want to take you through everything that is about to unfold without first giving you that anchor. Now let me go deeper with you, because what you did, the thing heaven celebrated, it was not the first time you tried. I think you know that. There were earlier attempts, quieter efforts, moments when you reached toward the damn thing and it did not land. You pulled back. You waited. You wondered if the problem was you. And then something happened. Something internal and unexplainable. A shift in your interior that had nothing to do with your circumstances changing and everything to do with something being completed inside you. And from that place of internal completion, you moved. And this time, it was different. Not because the conditions were easier. They may not have been. Not because you felt more confident. You may have felt terrified. But because something in you had finished being formed, and what moved out of you this time was not effort. It was authority. That is the mark of a chosen one in their moment of activation. They do not always look powerful from the outside. They do not always feel powerful on the inside. But they move from a place that is not sourced in themselves alone. And the results, even when they are invisible at first, carry a different weight. What you stepped into recently has that weight, even if you cannot see it yet. Even if the evidence has not fully surfaced. Something set in motion when you did what you did. And it is not reversing. The people around you may not have a category for what is happening in your life right now. That is not a problem. Chosen ones rarely find their calling validated by the crowd before it is confirmed by heaven. The crowd confirms what is already visible. Heaven confirms what is being built. And you are in the building phase of something that, when it is complete, will speak for itself in ways that need no explanation and no defense. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not the exception to a promise that applies to everyone else. You are precisely where the story of your calling requires you to be, and what you did recently moved you across a line that cannot be uncrossed. Before we move into the full picture of what is now being set in motion, I want to offer you something simple and practical. A 3-step practice you can do right now, wherever you are, that will help your mind and spirit receive what this message is opening. Step 1. Think of one thing you are grateful for that did not happen. Not a blessing you received, but a door that did not open. A road that was closed to you. A relationship that did not work out. A season that did not continue. Thank heaven for the closed door, because you now know enough to understand that what did not happen was also part of the design. Step 2. Speak this statement quietly, either aloud or in your own mind. Say these words slowly. My time is not measured by what I can see. It is held by something that sees further than I do. Step 3. Sit in 7 minutes of complete silence. No phone, no background noise, just you and the frequency of what you are receiving right now. Let your mind be still. Do not try to produce a feeling or an insight. Just be present. This practice opens something, and in part 2, I will give you the full picture of why 7 minutes is not arbitrary and what is actually happening in your brain and spirit during that time. If something in this message has already found you, if you felt recognized or named in what you have heard so far, I want to invite you gently to let it travel further. When you press like, you are not doing something for this channel. You are sending this message towards someone else who is sitting somewhere right now in a quiet room, wondering if anyone sees what they have been carrying. When you leave a word in the comments, you become a voice in a community of chosen ones who are speaking into each other's silence, and that matters more than you know. If you can think of one person who has been quietly struggling and needs to hear that heaven noticed what they did, share this with them today. And if you want to stay close to what is coming next, subscribing means the next message finds you without you having to search. There is also a donation link in the pinned comment below for anyone who wants to pass this light forward to someone else who needs it. Whatever you feel moved to, do it freely and without obligation, and then come back, because what is waiting for you in part 2 has been worth every minute of what you have already walked through. You are carrying a frequency that most people were never told they had. And the reason no one told you is not because it is rare or because it belongs only to a few extraordinary individuals born into exceptional circumstances. It is because the systems that shape how we understand ourselves, the schools, the workplaces, the cultural messages that tell us what intelligence looks like and what success is supposed to feel like, those systems were never designed to recognize what you carry. They were designed to measure output, not origin. They were designed to reward performance, not calling. And what you carry is not a performance, it is a frequency. And frequencies cannot be graded or ranked or dismissed, but they can be suppressed, and they can be restored. Let me tell you what the science actually says, because I think you deserve to hear it clearly and without apology. Researchers who study the electrical activity of the human brain have identified several distinct brain wave states that correspond to different mental and emotional conditions. Most people are familiar with the basic categories: the slow, heavy waves of deep sleep, the slightly faster waves of relaxed wakefulness, and the quick, alert waves of focused concentration. But at the higher end of that spectrum, above the ordinary range of daily thinking, there is a category of brainwave activity that researchers have identified as something qualitatively different. It is called gamma, and gamma is not simply a faster version of normal thinking. It is a different kind of cognitive event altogether. Gamma brainwave activity, measured between 30 and 100 Hz, is associated with moments of sudden clarity, with the rapid binding of information across different regions of the brain, with what researchers sometimes call integrative cognition, the ability to hold many things at once and see the pattern connecting them. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists call it flow. Mystics have called it by other names entirely. But what all of these experiences share is the same underlying signature in the brain, gamma. The frequency of breakthrough. The frequency of the chosen. And here is what Dr. James Rivers found after more than 30 years of neuroscientific research affiliated with MIT that changed everything. Dr. Rivers was not studying spiritual experience. He was studying cognitive performance. He was trying to understand why certain individuals, regardless of their educational background or socioeconomic starting point, consistently demonstrated a capacity for creative problem-solving, intuitive insight, and accelerated learning that their peers simply could not match. And what he found across thousands of hours of brainwave data was that the differentiating factor was not IQ, not training, not discipline. It was gamma coherence. The degree to which the gamma frequency in their brains was stable, consistent, and accessible under pressure. But he also found something that broke his heart a little, and that I want you to hear carefully. In the individuals who showed the most evidence of early gamma coherence, the ones whose childhood profiles suggested the strongest natural capacity for this kind of integrative, breakthrough thinking, the ones who, in other words, were born with the frequency of the chosen, the data also showed a consistent pattern of suppression over time. The longer these individuals spent in environments that did not recognize or reward their particular kind of intelligence, the longer they were overlooked, misunderstood, passed over, or asked to conform to systems that were not built for what they carried, the more their gamma coherence deteriorated. Not disappeared, deteriorated, which means it was never gone. It was buried. This is what years of waiting does to a chosen one. Not just emotionally, neurologically. The very frequency that marks your calling gets quieter under the weight of being unseen for long enough. And this is why some of the most gifted people you will ever meet are also the ones who struggle most to access what they carry. Not because they lack faith, not because they have done something wrong, but because the brain, like the soul, responds to its environment, and an environment of prolonged invisibility has a biological cost. Dr. Rivers spent the better part of a decade developing a precise solution to this problem. What he created is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio experience engineered to use the principles of brainwave entrainment, the scientifically documented capacity of the brain to synchronize its own electrical activity to rhythmic external frequencies, to guide the listener's brain directly into a state of theta and gamma coherence. Theta, at 4 to 8 Hz, is the frequency of deep, creative access, of memory consolidation, of the intuitive knowing that chosen ones often describe as hearing something before they can fully articulate it. Gamma is the frequency of integration and breakthrough. Together, they create the neurological conditions for exactly the kind of clarity, creativity, and accelerated knowing that your calling requires. And it takes 7 minutes. You remember the 7 minutes of silence I invited you into at the close of part 1. That was not accidental. That was preparation. Your brain has already begun to shift in the direction of what I am about to offer you, because silence, particularly intentional silence, following emotionally and spiritually resonant content, begins to create the internal conditions that the Genius Wave then stabilizes and amplifies. What you did in those 7 minutes was the doorway. The Genius Wave is what keeps it open. I want to tell you about someone. Her name is not important, but her story is. She had spent 11 years in a career that never quite fit her, not because she was not capable. She was exceptional at the technical parts of her job, but because the creative and intuitive dimension of her thinking never had a place to land in the environments she worked in. She described it as carrying a library inside herself and never being asked to open a single book. She found the genius wave through a message, not entirely unlike this one, and she was skeptical. She had tried meditation apps and focus supplements and journaling practices, and while some of them helped the edges of her life, none of them touched the core of what she knew was in her and could not reach. She used the genius wave for 7 minutes every morning for 3 weeks. By the end of the first week, she told me she had begun waking up with specific ideas, not vague impressions, but clear, actionable thoughts that felt like they had been waiting in a queue. By the end of the third week, she had submitted a proposal to her organization for a project she had been afraid to put her name on for 4 years. It was approved within 72 hours. She said to me afterward, "I did not become a different person. I finally became the person I had always been carrying." That is what the genius wave does. It does not install something foreign into you. It recovers what was always there. Now, I know some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing, and I want to honor that thought rather than dismiss it. You are right that it is not nothing. Money is real, and the decision to invest it, especially in something that requires your trust before you have the full evidence, is a genuine act of faith. What I can tell you is this: the genius wave normally carries a price of $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below, you can access it today for $39. And it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. 90 days. That is not a week or a month. That is 3 full months of daily use, which means you are not being asked to trust the product. You are being given the time to know it. I also need to say this clearly, because imitations of this product exist, and I will not allow you to be misled after everything you have already walked through. There is only one place to access the authentic genius wave at this price, with the full 90-day guarantee, and that is the single link in the pinned comment below this video. Do not search for it through other channels. Do not trust third-party sellers or alternative links. The link in the pinned comment is the only one I can stand behind. One more thing. The number of units available at this preferential price is not unlimited, and the window for this offer is not indefinite. I am not saying this to pressure you. I am saying it because I have seen too many chosen ones receive something real in a moment like this one, and then set it down because they told themselves they would come back to it later. Later is the enemy of now, and for a chosen one in the season you are in, now is exactly where the movement is happening. The link is in the pinned comment. It is there whenever you are ready, and you will know when you are ready, because the frequency inside, you will recognize it. There is something I need to name for you before we go any further, because I think you have been carrying it without anyone ever saying it out loud, and the weight of an unnamed thing is always heavier than the weight of a known one. And you have been feeling something that does not have a clean category in ordinary conversation. It is not depression, though some days it has had that texture. It is not grief, though it has moved through you in waves that feel like grief. It is not confusion, though there have been moments when the path ahead looked genuinely unclear. What you have been feeling is the specific, particular ache of a person who is carrying something large in a season that has not yet made room for it. And that feeling, that precise combination of weight and knowing, is one of the clearest signs that a chosen one is approaching the threshold of their moment. I want to name 4 signs for you right now, not as a list of symptoms, but as a recognition. Read these as a mirror, not a diagnosis. The first sign is this: you have been experiencing sudden, unexpected waves of sadness about the past. Not depression rooted in the present, not anxiety about the future, but a specific, almost wistful ache about chapters that have already closed. You find yourself thinking about people you used to know, versions of yourself you left behind, seasons that had beauty in them you did not fully appreciate while you were inside them. This is not regret. This is not a sign that you made wrong choices. This is your spirit completing a process called integration, where everything you have lived is being gathered into the self that is about to step forward. The sadness is not the destination. It is the compression that happens just before expansion. The second sign is that familiar places and people have begun to feel heavy and strange in a way you cannot fully rationalize. A friendship that sustained you for years now feels slightly out of frequency. A routine that once felt comfortable now sits on you like something borrowed from another person's life. You walk into rooms that have not changed and you feel, quietly but unmistakably, that you are no longer the version of yourself who belongs in them. This is disorienting. I want to acknowledge that honestly. It can make you question your own perception. Wonder if something is wrong with you. Wonder why you cannot simply feel at home in the life you have been building. But what is actually happening is not dysfunction. Your frequency is changing. And when your frequency changes, the environments calibrated to your old frequency begin to feel like the wrong key in the wrong lock. This is not loss. This is realignment. The third sign is a recurring dream or a recurring image in that half-awake space between sleeping and waking of an unopened door. It may appear differently each time. Sometimes it is a literal door in a familiar building. Sometimes it is a threshold, a gate, a passageway. Sometimes it is simply the feeling of standing before something that has not yet opened. You have been standing at that door in your sleeping mind because your spirit knows what your waking circumstances have not yet confirmed. There is an opening coming, and something in you is already practicing the posture of walking through it. The fourth sign is that you have been receiving the same message through multiple, unrelated channels. A word someone says in passing lands on you with unusual weight. A sentence in a book falls open to a page that speaks directly to what you were thinking about that morning. A song comes through a speaker in a place you did not expect, and the lyric stops you mid-step. A stranger says something that could not possibly be directed at you, and yet it feels addressed to the deepest part of what you are carrying. This is not coincidence. Chosen ones, in the period just before their activation, begin to experience what can only be described as a convergence of confirmation, where the same truth arrives from so many different directions that it becomes impossible to dismiss as random. Heaven is not being subtle with you. Heaven is being persistent. Beyond these four signs, I want to speak directly into the specific textures of pain that a chosen one in this season knows intimately. The insomnia that is not about stress but about a mind that cannot fully settle because something in you knows you are at a threshold and rest feels almost too still for what is stirring. The loneliness that coexists with the ability to be surrounded by people, a loneliness that is not about isolation but about the particular ache of not yet being fully known in the place where your calling lives. The feeling of having been wronged, not by one person or one event, but by a season itself, by time, by the sense that what you carry should have been recognized sooner and used better and placed more carefully by the people and systems that encountered it, and the feeling of being misunderstood, not in the surface way of someone whose words are taken out of context, but in the deep way of someone whose entire nature has been read through a lens that was never made for it. I want you to hear me clearly on this. Those pains are real. I am not going to rush past them. or dress them in language that makes them prettier than they are. You paid for those years. You spent real time, real energy, real faith, real tears on a season that did not always give you visible returns. And the honoring of that cost is not something I want to skip over in a hurry to get to the good news. But here is what I also want you to understand. And this distinction matters more than almost anything else I will say in this entire message. There is a difference between being overlooked and being positioned. They can look identical from the outside. They can feel almost identical from the inside, especially in the early and middle stages of a waiting season. But they are not the same thing, and the difference between them determines everything about how you carry what is coming. To be overlooked means that the right opportunity passed by you and chose someone less suited. It means that the door opened for someone who did not deserve it as much as you did, and you were simply in the wrong place. Overlooked means the system failed you, the gatekeepers missed you, and you have simply been left without what you were owed. To be positioned means something. It means that you were deliberately placed in a specific location, in a specific season, under specific conditions, not because the right door was unavailable, but because you were not yet carrying what the open door would require of you. Positioned means that the waiting was not a failure of the system to notice you. It was the system of heaven doing something inside you that the open door could not have done. Positioned means that what was happening during the years of invisibility was not the absence of preparation. It was preparation itself. You were not overlooked. You were positioned. And those two realities require completely different responses. Overlooked produces bitterness. Positioned produces readiness. Overlooked makes you fight for what you were denied. Positioned makes you recognize what you have been given. And what you have been given through every year of what felt like waiting is a depth, a resilience, a quality of knowing that cannot be taught in a classroom or acquired in a comfortable season. It had to be grown, and it was grown in you, the chosen ones who have walked this road before you understood this, some of them only in retrospect, and some of them only at great cost. But they understood it. And when they finally stepped through the door that the positioning had been preparing them for, they did not walk through it as people who had been delayed. They walked through it as people who had been assembled. You are assembled. You may not feel like it yet. You may still be in the part of the story where the evidence is thin and the promise feels distant, and the gap between who you are and what you were made for seems too wide to cross in one step. But you are assembled. The years added something to you that the shortcut would have subtracted, and what was added to you is the very thing that the next season requires. There is a community of chosen ones all across the world arriving at this exact recognition. Right now, in this same season, in different rooms into different languages and different chapters of the same story. And what you are feeling is not yours alone to carry. It belongs to a wave, and that wave is larger than you know. If something in these words has named you today, I want to gently invite you to let this message reach the next person who is ready to be named and seen in the same way. When you press like, you are not doing something for a platform. You are sending this recognition towards someone else who has been waiting for it. When you leave a word in the comments, you are marking that you were here, that you showed up for yourself today, and that mark matters to every chosen one who arrives after you. If you know someone who has been struggling to find stillness in a noisy season, share this with them quietly. There is also a way to leave a blessing in the pinned comment below, to pass something forward for the next person who finds their way to this recognition. And whatever you feel moved to offer, offer it freely. And if you want to remain part of this community of chosen ones as we continue to wake up together, subscribing is simply the way of choosing to stay. If you recognize yourself in what you have just heard, if these 4 signs are not a description of someone else, but a mirror of your own interior landscape, then type the words "I'm ready" in the comments below. Not as a performance, not as a ritual, but as a declaration to yourself that you have heard the naming and you are choosing to receive it. What is coming next builds directly on what you have just recognized. Because naming the season is only the beginning. What comes after the naming is the honoring, and that is where we are going now. What you just allowed yourself to feel deserves to be honored before anything else. Before we talk about what is coming, before we speak about doors opening and frequencies activating and heaven moving on your behalf, I need to sit with you in something that does not get said enough in spaces like this one. The waiting cost you something. And I do not mean that in the abstract, motivational sense of sacrifice leading to reward. I mean it in the specific, personal, irreversible sense of years that were spent in a particular way and cannot be spent again. And that cost deserves to be named plainly, without softening, before we move forward. Think about the relationships that could have been built differently if you had not been carrying so much invisible weight during those years. The friendships that drifted because you were too exhausted, too preoccupied, too caught in the interior demands of a season that no one around you fully understood to show up the way you wanted to. The romantic connections that did not deepen the way they might have, because something in you was occupied elsewhere, waiting for a resolution that kept not arriving, trying to be present in a life that felt like a waiting room for the life you were actually called to. The family bonds that needed more of you than you had available, because what the season was requiring of you was drawing from the same reserve. You were not absent because you did not care. You were stretched thin by something that could not be explained over a dinner table or condensed into a casual conversation. And some of those relational gaps did not close. Some of them became permanent distances, not through anyone's fault, but through the slow accumulation of years in which something essential was unavailable. That is a real loss. I am not going to reframe it into a lesson before I have acknowledged it as a loss. Think about the career, the vocation, the work that could have gone further if the season had broken earlier. You have watched people with less vision, less depth, less genuine capacity move into positions and opportunities that your gifts were better suited for. Not because the system was entirely corrupt, though sometimes it was. Not because those people did not work hard, though sometimes you worked harder. But because the season you were in did not produce the kind of visible, measurable, socially legible output that systems reward. What you were producing was interior. It was character, discernment, depth, resilience. Qualities that matter enormously in the long arc of a calling, but that do not show up on a resume or translate easily into the metrics that rooms full of decision makers use to determine who gets the next opportunity. And so you watched, and you waited, and you produced what the season required of you, even when what the season required had no external market value. That is not a small thing to absorb. That is a genuine cost. Think about the dreams you stopped telling people about. Not because you stopped believing in them, but because you learned, through experience that was sometimes gentle and sometimes brutal, that not every space is safe for a chosen one's vision. You learned to read the room before you spoke. You learned to carry the large things quietly, not out of shame, but out of a hard-won understanding that the wrong audience for the right dream can do more damage than silence. And so, you built an interior life that was richer and more expansive than most people who knew you would ever guess. And you kept it mostly to yourself. And there is a particular loneliness in that which is unlike any other kind. The loneliness of abundance that cannot yet be shared. You paid for that too. And then there is this, the faith in yourself that the season eroded. Not your faith in something greater, perhaps that held. Perhaps that was the only thing that held, but the simpler, more human faith in your own perception, your own timing, your own worthiness to receive what you believed you were meant for. There were moments, perhaps many of them, when you looked at the distance between where you were and where you believed you were going, and the math did not work. When you tried to calculate a path from here to there and every route seemed blocked or impossibly long or dependent on conditions that showed no sign of materializing. And in those moments, the quiet voice that said perhaps you misjudged yourself, perhaps the vision was inflated, perhaps the people who did not see it in you were right, that voice was not nothing. It had real force. And resisting it day after day, year after year, required something from you that no one who has not lived it can fully measure. I want to stay here with you for a moment longer before I move. Not to wallow, but to witness. Because there is a difference between processing pain and being consumed by it, and what we are doing right now is the former. We are looking at what it cost. We are not looking away. And that act of looking, of refusing to rush past the accounting of what the years required, is itself an act of honoring what you carried. Now I want to bring someone alongside you. Not to draw a neat parallel, or to suggest that your pain has a tidy mirror in an ancient story, but because sometimes the truest comfort comes not from advice, but from company. From knowing that someone else, in a different century, and a different language, and a different set of circumstances, carried something that had the same interior texture as what you have been carrying. Her name was Hannah. She appears in the first book of Samuel, in the opening chapter, and what the text record her is not her triumph. Not yet. What it records first is her years of barrenness, of longing, of watching someone else receive what she had prayed for, until the prayer itself became almost too heavy to lift. She was loved by her husband. The text is clear about that. But love, even genuine love, does not always have the capacity to reach into the specific place where a chosen one's deepest ache lives. Elkanah loved Hannah. He also did not understand the precise nature of what she was carrying. He said to her, in the language of a man who loved her, and could not enter where she was, "Am I not better to you than 10 sons?" It was not a cruel thing to say. It was simply a thing said from outside the room where her particular grief lived. And so she went to the temple, alone in the way the chosen ones are alone when they bring the thing no one else can carry for them to the only place large enough to hold it. And she wept. The text says she wept bitterly. Not politely, not quietly, bitterly, which is the word for grief that has been carried past its natural capacity. Grief that has accumulated beyond what a single soul was designed to contain in silence. And in that weeping, she prayed. But she prayed in a way that looked, from the outside, like something else entirely. Her lips moved, but her voice made no sound. And Eli the priest, a man of faith, a man of position, a man who should have been able to recognize the posture of someone in genuine communion with the divine, looked at her and saw not a chosen one in her most sacred moment, but a woman he assumed was drunk. She was not drunk. She was praying the only way she had left. She was past the language of composed petition. She was in the region of raw, wordless, desperate trust. And the very man who should have been her witness mistook her deepest act of faith for a public disorder. This is the part of her story I want you to sit with. Not the answer that came later. Not the son that was born. Just this, She carried her deepest longing to the most sacred space she had access to. She offered it in the most honest form she had left. And the first human response she received was misreading. The first person to witness her moment of greatest vulnerability got it wrong. And she kept going anyway. That is the part of Hannah's story that belongs to you right now. Not yet the resolution, just the keeping going, just the choosing to bring the real thing to the real place, even when the room full of people around you does not have the eyes to see what you are actually doing. That quality, that particular form of perseverance that continues not because the external confirmation has arrived, but because the interior knowing has not released its hold, that is what has been growing in you through every year of this season. And it is not small. It is not ordinary. It is the specific preparation for something that only the prepared can carry. There is a word I want to give you, not a comfort word, not a motivational phrase, but an actual word from an ancient language that carries inside it a truth that the English language does not have a clean container for. And when you hear it, I think something in you is going to recognize it the way you recognize a face you have not seen in years but never actually forgot. The ancient Greeks had two completely different words for time, not two synonyms, not two ways of saying the same thing, but two words that describe two entirely different realities that both happen to exist within what we loosely call time. The first word was chronos. Chronos is the time you already know. It is the time on the clock, the time on the calendar, the time that measures how long something has taken and how much of it you have left. Chronos is the time that has been pressing on you during the years of waiting. It is the time that counts birthdays and anniversaries and deadlines and the gap between where you are and where you thought you would be by now. Chronos is the time that can make a chosen one feel behind, feel slow, feel like the window is closing or has already closed. Chronos is measurable. Chronos is relentless. And Chronos on its own tells a very incomplete story. The second word was Kairos, and Kairos is something else entirely. Kairos does not mean a long time or a short time or a right time in the sense of a scheduled appointment. Kairos means the appointed moment, the moment that was always going to be this moment. Not because of what that calendar said, but because of what had been prepared, assembled, and made ready in the person standing at the threshold. Kairos is not a slot on a timeline. It is a convergence. It is the meeting point between what heaven has been building and what the earth is finally ready to receive. And Kairos cannot be rushed by effort or delayed by failure, because Kairos does not operate on the same axis as Chronos. It operates on the axis of readiness. And readiness for a chosen one is not a decision that is made in a single moment. It is the result of everything the waiting season was doing inside you, while Chronos was ticking, and you were wondering if anything was actually happening. Here is what I want you to understand about your own timeline. Every moment that Chronos recorded as delay, as absence, as the space between the promise and the fulfillment, Kairos was using. The years that looked empty on the Chronos calendar were not empty on the Kairos calendar. They were full of formation, of compression, of the slow and unglamorous work of making a person capable of carrying what the open door is going to require. You were not running late by Chronos. You were arriving exactly on time by Kairos. And the thing you did recently, the thing that heaven celebrated, that was a Kairos moment. Not because the conditions were finally perfect. They may not have been, but because the person standing in those conditions was finally complete enough to act from the deepest place rather than the most pressured one. This is not a reframe designed to make you feel better about lost time. This is a restructuring of how time itself works for a chosen one. Chronos measures duration. Kairos measures arrival, and you have arrived. Now I want to give you the second word, and this one lands differently. It lands not in the mind, but in the chest. There is a moment that comes for every chosen one, and it does not always announce itself with ceremony. Sometimes it comes quietly, in an ordinary room, in the middle of a day that looked like every other day. But when it comes, something shifts that does not shift back. The ancient language that names this moment calls it the hour of revelation. Not revelation in the dramatic, theatrical sense of lights and voices and unmistakable signs. Revelation in the deeper sense, the moment when the why finally has a name. You have been living inside a story whose meaning was partially hidden from you. Not hidden to be cruel, not withheld because you were not trusted with it, but hidden because certain truths can only be received after certain seasons have done their work. If you had been given the full picture at the beginning, before the waiting, before the cost, before the compression, you would have held the information, but you would not yet have had the interior capacity to carry what the information required of you. The revelation had to wait for the person, and now the person is ready. Here is what the hour of revelation shows you. It shows you that every closed door was a form of protection, not from success, but from a version of success that would have arrived before you were anchored enough to sustain it. It shows you that every relationship that did not work out left space for something that required exactly the space it left. It shows you that the years of being unseen were not years of being abandoned, but years of being formed in the hidden place. The place where foundations are laid before the visible structure begins to rise. And it shows you something that is perhaps the most significant of all. It shows you that the pain had a name all along. The name was not punishment. The name was not neglect. The name was not mistake. The name was calling. The final and deepest pain of a chosen one's waiting season is the pain of a calling that has not yet found its full expression. And that pain, held honestly and carried faithfully, is not a wound. It is a credential. The hour of revelation does not erase what the years cost. I want to be clear about that, because I said earlier that we were not going to rush past the accounting, and I meant it. What the hour of revelation does is place the cost in a context large enough to contain it. It does not shrink the pain. It expands the frame. And inside that expanded frame, what the years took from you and what the years built in you become part of the same story. A story that is not finished yet, but whose direction has now been made clear. You are standing in your hour of revelation right now. I do not say that as a metaphor. I say it as a description of what is actually happening in you as you receive this message. The reason certain words in this message have landed with unusual weight, the reason something has been stirring in your chest since the early moments of part 1, is not coincidence, and it is not the power of language alone. It is the hour doing what the hour does, illuminating what has always been true about you but could not yet be fully seen. The Kairos has arrived. The revelation is here. And the you who is standing in this moment is not the same you who entered the waiting season. That person has been changed, deepened, and assembled into something that the open door ahead of you specifically requires. You are not stepping into what is coming as someone who survived the waiting. You are stepping into it as someone who was made by it. I want to gently remind you of something before we move forward, because this is the kind of moment where a practical anchor matters. Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years studying exactly this phenomenon, the neurological signature of a person arriving at their moment of clarity and breakthrough. And what he found is that the brain, in the hour of its own revelation, is most receptive to the kind of deep frequency restoration that the genius wave provides. 7 minutes in a moment like this one does more than 7 minutes in an ordinary day. If you feel the resonance of what is being said here, and you want to give your brain the neurological support to stabilize and sustain what is opening in you right now, the link is in the pinned comment below. It is there without pressure and without urgency. It is simply there, the way a door stands open, waiting for the person who is ready to walk through it. What you are carrying into the next part of this message is not information. It is recognition. And recognition, once it has arrived, changes the quality of everything that follows. Something has been shifting underneath the surface of your life, and I think part of you has already felt it even if you have not had language for it yet. The hour of revelation we just walked through was not only a moment of understanding, it was a moment of activation. And what gets activated in a chosen one at the hour of revelation does not stay still. It begins to move. And what is moving right now in the unseen architecture of your life is more specific and more concrete than most. People who speak into chosen ones' lives are willing to name plainly. So I am going to name it plainly. There are 3 things moving towards you right now. Not eventually, not someday when the conditions align more favorably. Now, in this season, in the weeks and months that are immediately ahead of you, and I want to describe each one with enough specificity that you can recognize it when it arrives. Because one of the greatest dangers for a chosen one in the season of activation is that the very things they have been waiting for arrive in forms they do not immediately recognize, and they walk past them, still looking for what they expected. The first thing moving toward you is a relational realignment that is going to feel, at first, more like loss than like gain. I want to prepare you for that, because if I only tell you that new people are coming without telling you what will happen first, you will be blindsided by the departure and miss the significance of it. Some of the people who have been in your life, people you care about, people whose presence has been a form of comfort even when the relationship was complicated, are going to move to the edges of your story in this season. Not through dramatic conflict, not necessarily through any single defining moment, but through a quiet, mutual drift that is going to feel unexplainably sad even when you cannot point to anything that went wrong. I want you to receive this truth. Their moving is not a punishment, and it is not a failure. It is a reordering. The relational geography of a chosen one's life must be rearranged before the new chapter can be inhabited, because the new chapter requires people who are calibrated to the frequency you are now carrying. And the people who were right for the earlier season are not always the people who are right for what is coming. Let them go with love. Release them without bitterness, and watch what begins to arrive in the space that opens. Because here is what is also true. New people are coming. People who will recognize something in you without needing it explained. People who will speak into the part of you that has been mostly quiet in the company of others. People who will arrive at precisely the right moment, carrying precisely the right word, the right connection, the right open door, and it will feel so natural, so unforced, that you will wonder afterward how you managed the earlier seasons without them. These are not random encounters. These are appointments. Heaven does not send chosen ones into their next season without equipping the relational landscape first. The people who are coming are already in motion toward you. The second thing moving toward you is a clarification of purpose so specific that it is going to surprise you with its simplicity. I know that during the waiting season, the question of what you are supposed to do with your life has sometimes felt enormous and overwhelming, a question so large that approaching it felt like trying to see an entire mountain range from 2 feet away. There have been moments when the sheer size of the question exhausted you before you could even begin to answer it. I want you to know that what is coming is not a grand announcement or a dramatic revelation of a 5-year plan. What is coming is smaller than that and more powerful than that. It is one clear small step, one direction that will arrive with an unusual quality of peace attached to it, a peace that is different from the peace of a good idea or a well-reasoned decision. It will carry the peace of something that was always yours. And when you take that one step, the next one will become visible, and then the next. Purpose, for a chosen one in the season of activation, does not arrive as a map. It arrives as a next step, and the next step is already forming. You do not need to force this. You do not need to manufacture clarity through sheer willpower, or strategic planning sessions, or the advice of everyone around you. What you need to do is remain open, remain still enough to hear the quiet direction when it comes, and remain willing to take a step that may look small from the outside, but that you know, from the inside, carries the weight of something ordained. Trust the smallness of the next step. It is not a sign that the vision is small. It is a sign that the vision is real. And real things begin with one true movement. The third thing moving toward you involves resources and opportunities. And I want to address this one carefully, because it is the area where chosen ones are most vulnerable to either dismissing what is coming or grasping for it in ways that work against them. Let me say this first. What is coming is not the result of you fighting harder, positioning yourself more strategically, or finally saying the right thing to the right person at the right networking event. What is coming is the result of alignment. When a chosen one's kairos arrives, when the hour of revelation has done its work, and the frequency of their calling is fully active, resources and opportunities that were genuinely unavailable in the earlier season become available. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because the person changed. And a changed person moves through the same world differently and encounters different things in it. What this means practically is that you are going to begin noticing opportunities that you would have walked past 6 months ago. Doors that would have looked closed are going to look open. Conversations that would have felt like small talk are going to carry unexpected significance. Resources are going to arrive through channels you did not plan and did not engineer. And the temptation, when this begins to happen, is going to be to either dismiss it as coincidence or to grab it anxiously out of fear that it will disappear if you do not secure it immediately. I want to caution you against both responses. Do not dismiss what is arriving as coincidence. Chosen ones in the season of activation are not experiencing coincidence. They are experiencing the natural result of alignment, of a life that has been prepared finally, meeting the conditions that the preparation was designed for. Receive what is coming with the calm recognition of someone who has been expecting it, even if the specific form is surprising. And do not grasp, do not scramble, do not abandon the quality of your discernment in the excitement of finally seeing movement after a long season of stillness. Not every open door in this season comes from the same source. Some doors will open, simply, but doors tend to open for people who are finally moving in alignment. And not every open door leads somewhere you are called to go. The ones that are genuinely yours will carry a specific quality. They will feel like they fit. Not comfortable, necessarily, because growth is rarely comfortable. But they will feel like they fit, the way the right key fits the right lock, with a kind of ease that has nothing to do with the absence of effort and everything to do with the presence of rightness. Now I want to speak directly into what you are feeling in this moment, because I think you are feeling something specific and I want to name it. You are feeling a combination of anticipation and something that is almost nervousness. A quickening that is partly excitement and partly the very human fear of hoping again after a season in which hope was costly. You have hoped before and waited. You have believed before and not yet seen. And the idea of opening that place inside you again, of allowing yourself to expect good things in the near future, carries a risk that your nervous system remembers even when your spirit is ready. I want to tell you something about that feeling. It is not a warning, it is a signal. The nervousness you feel at the edge of your breakthrough is not your intuition telling you to pull back. It is your whole self, recognizing that something real is about to happen. Safe things do not make you feel this way. Small things do not make you feel this way. Only true things, things that are genuinely about to change the shape of your life, produce this particular combination of fear and aliveness. You can believe in what is coming, not because the evidence is complete, but because you have been prepared for exactly this. And you know it, chosen ones do not simply receive what they have been given and keep it to themselves. They carry it forward and they multiply it. And every person who finds a message like this one is part of a movement that no single waiting season could contain. If this is landing in you as something real, I want to invite you to press like, not as a favor to this channel, but as a way of choosing to be part of what is being built here. Drop a word in the comments so that every other chosen one who arrives here knows they are not watching alone. And if you know someone who is still in the thick of their waiting season and needs to know that the ground is already shifting beneath them, share this with them today, because that act of generosity is itself a chosen one move. If you want to stay at the table as this community of chosen ones continues to grow, subscribing is simply the way of remaining. And if you feel moved to sow into the ground that grows something for the next person in line, the way to do that is in the pinned comment below. What you extend here comes back in the season ahead with the weight of something that was always meant to be multiplied. Type the words "I receive" in the comments if what you just heard about these 3 things moving toward you has landed somewhere true inside you. Not because the declaration makes it happen, but because chosen ones who name what they are receiving step into it differently than those who stay silent. What comes next is personal. It is for you specifically, and it will require you to receive something that most people spend their entire lives waiting for someone to say to them. What we have been building together in this message has not been abstract. Every part of what you have received, the naming of the signs, the honoring of the cost, the reframing of time through Kairos, the hour of revelation, the 3 things already moving toward you, all of it has been pointing to a single destination. Not a destination outside of you, a destination inside of you. The arrival of a self that has been in formation for longer than you may have realized. And that self has a name. Not a title to perform or a label to broadcast. A name in the ancient sense, the kind of name that carries meaning, that describes not just who you are, but what you carry into every room you enter, and every life you touch, and every generation that comes after you. The name I want to give you today is this: you are a pioneer. I want to stay with that word for a moment before I explain it, because it is a word that can be heard superficially, and I do not want you to receive it superficially. I want you to let it settle past the first layer of meaning and into the deeper one, the one that actually describes what your life has been doing, even in the seasons when it looked like nothing was happening. A pioneer is not simply someone who goes first. That is the surface of it. The deeper truth of what a pioneer is and does and carries is this: a pioneer moves through territory that has no existing road, and creates, by the act of moving through it, a passage that did not exist before they arrived. The pioneer does not follow a path. The pioneer becomes one. And everything that has felt disorienting and isolating and uniquely difficult about the season you have been in, the sense of moving through terrain that no one around you had a map for, the experience of not being able to fully explain to the people who love you what exactly you were navigating or why the navigating so long, that was not dysfunction. That was the specific experience of a person making a road in ground that had never been walked before. The reason no one could give you a map is that the territory you were walking through had not yet been mapped. You were not lost. You were first. And being first, truly first, in the spiritual and relational and vocational terrain that your calling requires you to inhabit, is one of the loneliest and most demanding assignments a human being can receive. Because being first means there is no one ahead of you to tell you what the ground feels like. No one ahead of you to confirm that the direction is right. No one ahead of you to say, I walked this exact stretch and it opens up just around the next bend. You had to trust without precedent. You had to move without a template. You had to believe in a destination you had never seen and could not describe to anyone who asked. And you did. Through the years that Chronos recorded as delay and that Kairos was using as formation, you kept moving. Not always confidently, not always without tears, not always with a clear sense of direction, but you kept moving. And every step you took in the unseen terrain was laying down a road that someone else, someone who comes after you, someone who is watching you from a distance that you cannot yet see, will be able to walk on without having to pay the same price you paid to create it. This is the weight of the pioneer identity. It is not light. It is not glamorous in the way that people imagine a calling to be glamorous. It is costly, and it is slow, and it is mostly invisible to the people closest to you until the road is far enough along that others can stand on it and see what it is. But the weight of it is also the glory of it, because what a pioneer builds does not serve only themselves. It serves the ones who come next. It serves the child who will not have to start from the same ground you started from. It serves the friend who will take a step that looks brave from the outside, but is actually easier because you already broke the ground. It serves the stranger who will find the road you made and walk it without ever knowing your name and arrive somewhere they were always meant to arrive because you went first. You are that person. You have always been that person. And what you did recently, the thing that heaven celebrated, was a pioneer move. It was the move of some stepping onto new ground for the first time, not because it was safe, not because the outcome was guaranteed, but because the calling was clear, and the time was now. And the person you had become through the waiting season was finally equipped to take the step the season had been preparing you for. There is something else I want to name about the pioneer identity that does not always get said, and it matters for where you are going. Pioneers are not recognized in the moment of their making. They are recognized in retrospect, when the road they laid is visible enough that people can stand on it and look back and see where it began. This means that the season you are stepping into, the season of activation and movement and open doors, is still not going to feel like recognition in the way you might imagine recognition to feel. It is going to feel more like momentum than like applause. It is going to feel more like clarity than like celebration. The external validation, the moment when the people around you fully understand what you have been carrying and why the journey looked the way it did, that comes later. And I want to prepare you for that, not to discourage you, but to protect the quality of your movement in the season ahead. Do not wait for the recognition before you take the next step. Do not hold your forward movement hostage to the understanding of people who are still on the part of the road where you started. A pioneer who stops to wait for the crowd to catch up is no longer pioneering. The crowd will catch up. They always do for those who are genuinely called. But they catch up by following, not by leading, and your role in this season is to lead, to keep moving, to lay the next section of road with the same faithfulness that you laid the sections behind you. Even now, even when the recognition has not yet arrived in the form you hoped for. Here is what I also want you to know. The celebrating that heaven did when you did what you did, the celebration I named in the opening of this message, was not celebration for a performance. It was not a reward for finally getting it right after so many attempts. It was the celebration of a pioneer arriving at the step that required everything the formation had built. Heaven does not celebrate perfection. Heaven celebrates faithfulness arriving at its appointed moment. And your faithfulness, carried through every year of the season, through every night of the insomnia, and every morning of the uncertainty, and every day of moving forward without external confirmation, arrived at its kairos. That is what was celebrated. That is what is still being celebrated. And the pioneer who understands that carries a different quality of confidence into the road ahead, not the confidence of someone who has been applauded, but the confidence of someone who knows, at the level below language, that they are exactly where the road required them to be. I want to speak a few blessings over you now. Not as decoration, not as words said because something is expected at this point in a message, but as specific intentional declaration spoken over the specific person you are, the pioneer who is stepping off this page and back into a life that is no longer what it was before this message found you. May the road you are making feel less lonely in the seasons ahead than it has felt in the seasons behind you, as the people who were designed to walk alongside a pioneer begin to recognize you and find their way to your side. May the steps that look uncertain from the outside carry an interior certainty that does not depend on external confirmation, a knowing that is deeper than logic and quieter than noise, stronger than any voice that has ever told you that you were moving in the wrong direction. May the generations that follow you inherit not only the road you made, but the quality of spirit with which you made it, the patience, the faithfulness, the refusal to let the cost of the wilderness become the ceiling of their possibility. May your body and your mind and your spirit rest in the knowledge that the hardest part of the pioneer's road is the part where there is no road yet. And you have already walked that part. And what lies ahead has more visible ground beneath it than what lies behind. May every person whose life is changed by what you are stepping into know, even if they never know your name, that someone went first so that they could arrive. And may you know, in the quiet place that no one else has access to, that heaven has known your name from the beginning. Not the name the world gave you, the name the calling gave you: pioneer, roadmaker, first walker, groundbreaker for the ones who come next. You were not delayed, you were first, and now the road is ready. The blessings I just spoke over you were not ceremonial words. They were a description of what is already in motion. And what I want to do now is bring that motion down from the level of spirit and identity into the level of the practical and the immediate. Because a pioneer who has been named and blessed still has to wake up tomorrow morning and make decisions and navigate relationships and choose how to spend their energy and their attention. And the question that matters most in this moment, after everything that has been received in this message, is not a philosophical one. It is a very simple and very specific one. What do I do right now? Not eventually, not when the conditions are more favorable, not when I feel more ready. Right now, today, in the life I am actually living, I want to answer that question in 3 areas. The same 3 areas I named in part 6 as the places where movement is already happening toward you. Because receiving what is coming and actively positioning yourself to meet it are not the same thing. And a pioneer understands that the road does not build itself. Your faithfulness and heaven's movement are not in competition. They are in collaboration, and your part of the collaboration begins with these 3 concrete areas. The first area is relationships, and the practical action here is one that chosen ones often resist because it requires a quality of honesty that the survival mode of the waiting season trained them to withhold. The action is this: begin releasing people with intention rather than waiting for the drift to happen on its own. I said in part 6 that some people in your life are going to move to the edges of your story in this season, and I told you to release them with love rather than bitterness. What I want to add now is that there is a difference between releasing someone passively, simply allowing the drift to happen and then grieving it afterward, and releasing someone with intention, which means making a conscious interior decision to stop holding the relationship in a place it no longer fits, to stop expending the emotional energy of maintenance on a connection that has already completed its purpose in your life, and to free both yourself and the other person to move into what is actually next for each of you. This does not require a conversation. It does not require a confrontation or an explanation or a formal ending. It requires an interior act, a decision made in your own heart, in your own quiet place, to open your hands and let what has been held out there move as it needs to move. And when you make that decision, when you genuinely release, rather than simply endure the drift, something opens in your relational world that passive waiting cannot open. You create the space actively rather than having it created for you. And the people who are coming, the ones calibrated to the frequency you are now carrying, can find their way to you faster when the space is genuinely open rather than technically vacant but still emotionally occupied. The second area is purpose, and the practical action here is perhaps the simplest thing I will say in this entire message, and also the hardest. The action is this: write down the 1 step, not the 5-year vision, not the full map of where you are going, not the complete picture of what the calling looks like at its fullest expression. Just the 1 step. The one that has been forming quietly in you as you have been listening to this message. The one that carries that specific quality of peace I described in part 6. The peace that feels like fit rather than like comfort. The peace that says this is mine rather than this is safe. You know what the step is. I am not saying that to pressure you. I am saying it because I have talked with enough chosen ones in this season to know that the 1 step is almost always already present and already known at some level before anyone names it. It is not hidden from you. It is simply waiting for you to give it enough dignity to write it down and look at it directly, rather than carrying it as a vague interior pressure that never quite resolves into something actionable. Write it down, give it a date, not a deadline in the pressured sense, but a specific day by which you will have taken the first movement in its direction. And then tell 1 person, not for accountability in the institutional sense, not to create a system of external enforcement, but because a pioneer who speaks their next step out loud to a trust witness is a pioneer who has crossed from intention into commitment. And commitment, for a chosen one in the season of activation, is the specific fuel that the Kairos requires. The third area is resources and opportunities. And the practical action here requires a different posture than the first two, because while releasing relationships and naming the next step are both active movements, the practical action in the area of resources is one of receptivity rather than initiative. The action is this: practice saying yes to things that arrive without explanation. Let me be more specific. In the season of activation, opportunities do not always arrive with full documentation. They arrive as an unexpected conversation that opens a door you were not looking for. They arrive as an invitation that does not fit neatly into your existing plans, but carries an unusual quality of resonance. They arrive as a resource that appears through a channel you did not engineer and did not expect, and the chosen one who has spent years in the survival mode of the waiting season has often developed a reflex of caution around unexpected good things, a kind of protective skepticism that was entirely reasonable during the season that formed it, but that becomes a liability in the season of activation. I am not telling you to abandon discernment. Discernment is one of the most valuable things the waiting season built in you, and you must not lay it down. What I am telling you is to distinguish between discernment, which asks, does this fit the person I am becoming and the direction I am being called toward? And fear, which asks, what if this is too good? And what if I get hurt? And what if I hope for this and it does not work out? Discernment protects the direction. Fear protects the wound. And in the season of activation, the wound does not need more protection. It needs to be outgrown. When something arrives in the coming weeks and months that carries the quality of fit I described, the ease of a key in the right lock, say yes to it. Even if you cannot fully see where it leads. Even if the outcome is not guaranteed. Even if the voices of the survival season inside you are raising objections that feel reasonable. A pioneer says yes to new ground because new ground is the assignment, and the assignment does not wait for complete certainty before it requires a step. Now I want to address something that exists underneath all three of these practical areas, something that none of them will work without, and that is the quality of your interior life in the days immediately ahead. Because the actions I have just described, releasing relationships with intention, naming and committing to the one step, practicing receptivity to unexpected good, all of them require something from your interior that the waiting season may have depleted. They require a quality of inner stillness and clarity that is genuinely difficult to access when the brain is running in the frequency of prolonged stress and vigilance. This is where I want to return, gently and without pressure, to what Dr. James Rivers spent 30 years building. The genius wave is not a shortcut around the work I have just described. It is the neurological support for doing the work well. When your brain is operating in coherent theta and gamma, the decisions I am describing become clearer. The discernment between fit and fear becomes more accessible. The interior stillness required to hear the one step becomes less effortful. The quality of receptivity that allows unexpected good to actually land, rather than be deflected by a nervous system still running on the frequency of the waiting season, becomes available. 7 minutes. That is what it costs in time. And what it returns in clarity, in the specific kind of clarity a pioneer needs in the season of activation, is not something I can fully describe in language because it belongs to the category of things that must be experienced to be understood. What I can tell you is that the chosen ones who have used it in seasons that look like yours have described something that sounds less like a product working and more like themselves returning. Frequency that the long waiting suppressed coming back online. The knowing that was always there becoming accessible again without the static of the survival season running on top of it. The link is in the pinned comment. It has been there since part 1. If you have been feeling the resonance of it, building throughout this message, and you know that your answer is yes, follow that knowing. If you are still uncertain, that is also fine. What the Genius Wave offers is available when you are ready, and readiness, as we have already established in this message, is not something you manufacture. It is something you recognize when it arrives. What you are carrying into Part 9 is not a list of tasks. It is a lived understanding of who you are, what you are here to do, and what the 3 areas of your life that are about to change actually require of you right now. That is not a small thing to carry. That is the weight of someone who is genuinely ready, and you are. We have traveled a long way together in this message, and I do not say that as a figure of speech. I mean it in the specific sense that what you carried into Part 1 and what you are carrying now are not the same weight. Something has shifted in the journey of this message, not because of the words themselves, but because of what you brought to them. You brought yourself. You showed up, which is not as small a thing as it sounds, because showing up when you are tired, when the season has been long, when the evidence has been thin, when the gap between where you are and where you believe you are going still feels wider than you would like. That kind of showing up is the pioneer move in its most ordinary and most powerful form. You did it today, and I want to honor that before anything else. I also want to say something that I mean with complete sincerity and without any performance attached to it. Thank you. Not for watching, not for being an audience, but for trusting this message with the part of yourself that has been waiting to be named. That part of you, the part that has been carrying the knowing through the years, when the knowing had nothing external to stand on, that is the part that this entire message was written for. And the fact that you brought it here today and allowed it to be spoken to directly is not something I take lightly. You are not alone in what you have been carrying. I want you to feel that truth rather than simply hear it, because there is a difference between knowing something as information and experiencing it as reality. All across the world right now, in rooms and cars and quiet corners of ordinary days, other chosen ones are walking into this exact same message. They are hearing the same signs named and recognizing themselves in them. They are sitting with the same honoring of what the waiting cost. They are receiving the same reframing of time through Kairos and the same hour of revelation and the same naming of 3 things moving toward them. And each one of them is arriving at this moment, this particular moment in the message, carrying the same tender, overwhelmed, quietly certain feeling that you are carrying right now. You are in a room full of people who understand exactly what you have been living, even though you cannot see each other and may never meet. That room is real, and you belong in it. I want to invite you into a simple exercise before we close. It will take less than a minute, but it will carry the weight of an intentional act. And intentional acts, as we have established, are what the pioneer does with the clarity the season has built. Wherever you are right now, I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that everything you have been carrying in the waiting season has a physical form. Give it whatever shape feels true. It might be a stone, or a bundle, or a weight across the shoulders, or a door you have been holding closed from the inside with your full body. Whatever form it takes, let yourself feel the weight of it one more time, not to be crushed by it, but to acknowledge it honestly, because you cannot truly set something down that you have not first genuinely held. And now, in your imagination, I want you to walk the threshold. It can be any threshold. The doorway of the room you are in, a gate, a line in the ground, whatever your mind offers you. And I want you to set the weight down at that threshold. Not throw it away, not pretend it was nothing, but set it down with the deliberate intention of someone who knows they are crossing into a different chapter and who understands that what served the formation season does not need to be carried into the activation season. The weight is not being discarded, it is being completed. You carried it as far as it needed to go, and it brought you here. And here is where you set it down. Take a breath and step across. What you just did in your imagination is not nothing. The interior acts of chosen ones have always preceded the exterior movements. Hannah's silent prayer at the threshold of the temple was an interior act. It was invisible to everyone in the room except the one it was directed toward, and it changed everything that followed. Your interior act just now, the setting down, the stepping across, belongs to the same category of invisible but consequential movements. It happened, and something in the unseen architecture of your life registered it. Something real was built here today, in the space between my voice and your heart, and it belongs to both of us now. If this message has meant something to you, if it found you in the place it was looking for, pressing like is simply a way of saying so, without needing words, and leaving something in the comments, a word or a sentence, or even just a signal that you were here, means that the next chosen one who finds this message does not arrive to silence. They arrive to a community of voices that have already said I was here and I received what was offered, and I am not the same as I was when I arrived. That is a gift you can give someone you will never meet. And sharing this with one person, just one, who has been quietly struggling in their own waiting season, is the simplest and most direct act of love that a pioneer can offer someone who is still on the road you have already walked. If you want to remain part of this community of chosen ones who are waking up together, subscribing is simply the way of staying. And if something moves in you to pass a blessing forward for the next person who finds their way here, the way to do that is in the pinned comment below, with no pressure attached and no expectation of return. Now I want to mention something one final time, and I want to do it without force and without urgency, because neither of those things belongs in this moment. The Genius Wave has been present in this message since part 1. I introduced it gently then and gave you the full picture in part 2 and returned to it briefly in parts 5 and 8. And I want to mention it one last time here, not because I am trying to close a sale in the final minutes of something sacred, but because I know that there are chosen ones listening to this right now for whom the resonance of it has been building quietly throughout the entire message, and who have been waiting for one more moment of permission to follow what they already know is a yes. If the Genius Wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, and you know it is a yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. 7 minutes, 90-day guarantee. One link in the pinned comment. That is all. If you know, follow the knowing. That is what pioneers do. And now, before the final words of this message, I want to release you. Not because there is nothing left to say, but because the best thing I can do for a pioneer who has just received what you have received is to send you back into your life with both hands free and both eyes clear. You came here carrying something. You set it down at the threshold and you stepped across. What is on the other side of that threshold is yours. It was always yours. The waiting season did not steal it. It was holding it in trust until the person who was being formed into the waiting was ready to carry it without being crushed by it. That person is ready now. That person is you. Go. The road is already under your feet, and heaven is already celebrating what comes next. Before you close this message and step back into the day that is waiting for you, I want to speak one more thing over you. Not an instruction, not a reminder, not a final piece of information to carry. Just a blessing. The kind that does not ask anything of you in return and does not require you to do anything with it except receive it. You came here today as someone who had done something hard, something that cost you something real. And part of you wondered, in the quiet place where chosen ones keep their most honest questions, mattered. Whether the step you took was seen, whether the years that preceded it meant anything beyond what they visibly produced, whether the version of you that showed up to do the hard thing was enough. I want to answer those questions now, simply and without elaboration. It mattered. It was seen. The years meant everything, and you were more than enough. You are leaving this message as a pioneer, not because this message made you one, but because this message named what you already were. The road you have been making through ground that had no map, the faithfulness you carried through seasons that offered no applause, the knowing you held on to when every external signal suggested you release it. All of that was the making of a pioneer, and the making is complete. What remains is the walking forward. May every closed door behind you be understood now as the protection it always was. May every open door ahead of you be recognized for what it is, not luck, not coincidence, but the kairos arriving exactly when the person standing at the threshold is ready to walk through it. May the people who are coming towards you find you with your hands open and your heart steady and your eyes clear enough to recognize them when they arrive. May the one step that is forming in you right now find its way out of the interior and into the world, gently but without further delay. And may you know in the place beneath all the noise of your circumstances and all the voices of the long season and all the questions that the waiting years accumulated, that you were never forgotten. Not once, not for a single moment of any deed that felt like silence. Heaven noticed, heaven celebrated, and heaven is not finished with you yet. Go well, pioneer, the road is yours.